weekend and tomorrow are part of a national effort by the AFL-CIO, a group Interfaithful to Justice, and many others to support worker rights. We planned this conversation back in January, so this is really an understanding of the divine. There were about 3 times that this date for this panel almost got moved, and so the fact that it takes place in the context of a major national effort, I think is wonderful, and so we're glad that so many of you were able to join us just for this. For those of you who are new to Haddonfield meeting, we'll probably have other people get in over the next 10 minutes as they finish their conversations and business. So I'd like to introduce the other people on the panel. This is Kitty Taylor Mizuno. She's an English as a second language teacher in the Camden schools and also was a teacher in Japan. And I'm hoping we'll be able to think about some of the differences between those two. Candy Lippincott is a visitor from Morristown Friends Meeting. She's an art teacher and a representative with the Camden Education Association. Both of them are part of the New Jersey Education Association. And David is the first teacher on our panel, David Austin. He's first vice president with Evesham Township Education Association, also a member of NJEA. I'm Linda Lotz. I'm a retired member of AFSCME, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. I was part of their nonprofit local here in Philadelphia, working with the American Friends Service Committee. And I was also a national board member with Interfaithful to Justice. And we've been having some conversations locally about looking at ways to support teachers given some of the things that are happening here in New Jersey. So we'll hear some of that come out of our conversation. We thought we would have Kitty start, and then Candy and David, and then come back to me. Our goal is to talk for 25 minutes, something like that, and then leave some time for conversation afterwards.
Oh, I'm not going to stay. I just, I'm passing around the list. If you are not from Haddonfield Friends Meeting, and if you would kindly sign your name and your affiliation, then we'd like to continue being in contact in the future. So that's yellow pads going around for that. I'll start just by saying that ever since I first known Linda Lotz, I guess, she has spoken with me about her previous work in worker justice. And I've realized over these years how, for myself, my consciousness has been very low and my involvement has been low also. And I think the strongest thing that I feel now is how grateful I am to the people like David and Linda and Candy and others around me who have helped to raise my consciousness about how important worker justice issues are. I should say about Candy, I think you may remember I've shared this before, but the reason that I'm a teacher in Camden is that Candy and 2 other Quaker teachers did an event at the Morristown Friends Meeting back in the early 90s that I attended, just talking about the work that they do in Camden, and that inspired me to want to go and teach there. And that, for me, was the beginning, really, of being, let's see, my public school teaching had started 1 year earlier, but that was the first time that I was actually a member of labor unions. The first 25 years of my teaching career were in private schools in Japan and in this country. And I have the feeling that I was part of kind of a privileged elite that didn't have to think about worker rights because we were pretty well off. And it's been a real education for me to learn and have my consciousness raised. So I think I'm going to leave, for me, I'm going to leave it there for now and maybe jump in later with some other things. I'd like to leave plenty of time for the others.
You better standing up.
Okay.
You notice I'm wearing my uniform. I've also spotted. I've been doing tie-dyeing. It's the only one I have, so I just keep using the same spotted uniform. I bought a silk screen yesterday, and I'm going to make some more. I love my job. I teach this year kindergarten sometimes, but mostly 3rd through 7th grade art. And I teach in a building that was it's called Lanning Square in South Camden. It's a building that's over 150 years old. It was a 35-year-old building, but that one was demolished because it was falling apart 8 years ago, and they were going to rebuild it within 2 years. But that's not going to happen. We're off the list now. I love my job, except for this year. When I get to school, it feels a little bit like, well, when I wake up in the morning, it feels like I've been sucker punched. It's not exactly a Quaker term, but that's how I feel when I get in my car and go to school. And I'm feeling that from everybody I work with. I'm getting a little upset. That's kind of strange. Anyway, I'm from a union family. We have pipe fitters. My grandfather was a pipe fitter. My father was a union electric type printer. My brother was a mason, now a custodian. There's been police persons in my family, lots of carpenters, some independent, some under union, nurses, caregivers. But in every single one of those cases, unionism was very important for my family. I was brought up with it. My father was on strike a few different times, and I can remember as a kid when I wanted to sell magazines for Barrington School Systems for the Curtis Printing Company, my father said, "You can't sell those magazines." I said, "I gotta sell those magazines. Gotta get that pencil with the prize." And he said, "Janie, tell her she can't. It's not a union shop, and they're cutting benefits." And I think I still sold the magazines. But with the beginning of learning about why it was important. I like to believe that all people are mostly just, have the light of God in them, but I think a lot of times there's a lot of coats over the light and you need to undress them a bit. I believe that generally they treat each other justly and without needing threatened by grievances or by lawsuits. But not all can be trusted that way, and I feel that that's a pretty big deal. So I don't want to depend on their goodwill. I need to have a little muscle behind it, and the union has proved to be the muscle that I need. I mainly go by my family's history for that. I have a lot of stories to tell you, but I'm going to just narrow it down to a quick little one, which isn't exactly a union story, but it's the idea behind unionism. Back, I think it was after the Depression, or around the time of the Depression, my history is really lousy. It was 1925, 30-ish, something around there. There was a young, strong, 26-year-old man in my family, Bob Fleming, and he had spent a lot of time on the rails, hoboing across the country without a job. But then he came back to the Philly area where he lived and found that they were hiring at a cotton factory where they made cotton cloth. And he went there. He was strong. He was healthy. If he could get the job, it was dependable wages and hours. As he was walking down the floor, he had just recently been hired to go there. He saw a whole row of giant machines. The place was filled with the loudest sound you could imagine, kind of like a swoosh, swoosh, clunk, clunk, swoosh, swoosh, clunk, clunk, swoosh, swoosh, clunk, clunk. This cadence, really loud, and a row of machines with these big arms that would reach over and grab the cloth and the thread and move it across, grab the cloth, move it across, grab. And every few minutes there'd be this sound of clunk, slam, and one of these arms would reach out and nearly hit the row of operators who were all young women, 16 to 21 or thereabouts, who would be sitting there operating those machines. And he saw them. I think they're rather attractive women. He saw them and he said, "Hey girl, you can't work on that machine. That's going to kill you." And the woman looked up and she said, "Oh, it always does that. We told him about it, but he said, well, you got to tell them that it needs to be adjusted. It's just out of alignment, that it needs to be tightened." And she said, well, we have told them, but they just don't come and fix it. You just have to watch it. You know, if you watch it and you duck in time, it's pretty much okay. And he said to them as a whole, hey girls, all of you together need to say you can't work on that machine until it just gets adjusted. It's an easy fix. And he was rather handsome young man. They stopped working on that machine. And it got fixed. It was a really quick fix. But until they stopped the entire mechanism of all that cloth going by and getting made, until they stood together, it wasn't getting fixed. The foreman manhandled my grandfather out of that room and off the premises because obviously he was a troublemaker, but the machine had been fixed. It wasn't a union shop. Sometime later, that man, Bob Lemming, married Thelma Pike, my grandmother. After that, he got a series of jobs, and his last job for about 20 years of his life was working in New York Ship, which was a shipbuilding thing on the port. His job was sewing asbestos covering on pipes in submarines and shipholds. And yeah, it was union, but it was very difficult to get rights of workers taken care of. The air was completely filled with asbestos all the time, and the temperatures were over 100 degrees. He was left-handed, and only left-handed, so he got always the end of sewing of the pipe covers at the one end, where most of the workers were the other end, because he was able to work in the other direction. He constantly would ask the management in his sweet way to install ventilating fans and pipes to suck the air out and also cool it a bit. But they said that if they did that, they'd have to remove it later because when the ships go out, they weren't going to leave all the ventilating fans in there, and it wasn't really hurting anything anyway. Of the 250 or so men that worked in that job during those 20 years, every single one of them that didn't fall off the dock and die that way died from asbestosis, including my grandfather. But he lived long enough to win the suit, which caused my grandmother to be able to live, live and stay in her house for about 15 years after he passed on. He won that case in Camden. It was the only case in Camden City Hall that was won by any of the workers in that facility, because the rest of them all kicked it too soon. Every year, the management from that company that supplied the income for my grandmother would stop by to see how Mrs. Fleming was, and she was still alive, and then they'd say, okay, and then they'd go away. I might add to you that this is just one thing that doesn't usually come up. When my grandfather would come home from work, he would take his clothes off in Collingswood on the back porch in the metal stairway, most of his clothes, and he would carry them down to the washer to wash. But he didn't want that asbestos smell, the sweet smell of asbestos, to be in the house with all of us. My mom has a breathing problem. She was just a child in the house, and it's supposed to be asbestos. It hasn't got to the point where it's going to kill her, but she can't go up a set of steps without losing her breath. So that's pretty much it. What I want you to do, when you go home, any of you from union families, I kind of had this thinking that you weren't all going to make it. A lot of kids don't know about unionism. Teenagers don't know. Why the heck? They're just stealing our money, taking our dues. What I'd like you to do is tell them a little bit about your parents, your grandparents. Go to the library and rent out Grapes of Wrath. Greg and I had a great date night a couple nights ago. We watched Grapes of Wrath. They have tissues handy. Also, Silkwood, it's kind of timely. There's Norma Ray is always a good one. And there's about 20 more, and I think we have a list there of films that you might want to consider watching to remind people, because they're good stories. You cry a little, but you remember about what it was all about. Thank you.
I'm not from a union family. I'm from a management family. My dad was the first person in his family to graduate from college. His dad was a pattern maker. I don't know if he was union or not because I never knew him. But my dad was an engineer, and he quickly got to a management position. And what I grew up hearing about unions was that they were difficult to work with, that they made life difficult for management. But I do remember my dad having a modicum of respect for the men that he worked with. And I think that was because of his own personal background and the struggles that his family had during the Depression. I got a little bit of a union, an education about unions in the 60s and the 70s when my father was president of the Board of Education at Cherry Hill for a number of years. And they went through 2 strikes. And I later learned through my union mentor that this was the time when teachers in New Jersey really were militant, as opposed to what we're being accused of being now. This was the time when we won our collective bargaining rights.
What year was that?
In Cherry.
What year?
In the 60s. Mid-60s to late 60s, early 70s. And where teachers were losing their jobs and being blackballed out of other jobs and going to jail. So it was a loud and rowdy time, and a couple of those strikes were very difficult. We woke up one morning and found that all the tires on our family cars had been punctured. And that made my mom scared and made my dad angry and made us late for school. But even with all that craziness, the one thing I knew about my father was that he respected teachers, and he was involved in being on the Board of Education, not because he wanted to be a mayor or something someday, but because he believed in education, and public education in particular, and that was his way of serving, that was the way being served. But all that kind of went away until I changed my major from being a journalism major in college to being an education major. And I found out at the time that my father's, the profession in the world that he despised the most was journalism, because of the abuse that he felt like he had suffered when he was on the board with one particular Camden County-based newspaper, whose name I won't mention. But then when I went into education, he was supportive of that, and I thought that was good, considering all that our family had been through with the teachers. And that never really, we didn't really have too many conversations about that, because most of my early teaching career was just about teaching, and family circumstances and layoffs and things like that early on caused me to bounce around a little bit. And it wasn't until 12 years ago, when I landed in the job that I have now, where I started to become conscious as an educator of labor-related issues. And this was mainly because of my mentor, George, who's retired now, who we used to have really lively discussions about politics at the lunch table, and we get to the point where we gave our colleagues headaches and he didn't want to eat with us anymore. I was a liberal then. George was radical. So, he did a really good job of stirring me up and educating me, and he knew he had a live one after a little bit of a while. And he got me involved in the association as soon as it was safe after I had my 3 years in the day and I got my tenure. At that point, he was able to kind of rope me into becoming a building rep. And he promised he would train me and he would. And we went through a contract negotiation a year after that, under leadership which is long passed by, so I can now tell tales after school. But I was thinking about this after our last little organizing meeting, about what it was that really was kind of my light bulb moment as an educator in terms of getting involved in the union. We had a contract negotiation, and our association was not exactly known for being particularly activist or militant. It would not be a word that anybody would have used. Our contract back then was about this thick, which basically means there's nothing in it, other than the salary. And I knew from talking to our classroom aides and our cafeteria workers in particular, that there were things in that negotiation that they wanted fixed. There was contract language that they wanted added, that they felt like they were being taken advantage of in a number of different places. And when they laid their issues out to me as their building rep, the person was going to take these issues to the negotiating team. They wanted this stuff included. They wanted it taken seriously. So negotiation went on as it always did. And as negotiation too, in quiet and secret, there were no updates. The negotiation process lasted about a week. Those were the good old days. And our union president made his annual, or whenever the contract came up, visits to our different buildings to say, here's the salary guide, the vote is next week. And I was told that was going to be the process. Here's what we negotiated, and the vote will be next week. So he came to our meeting and he laid out the salary guide, which was skewed dramatically to the top of the guide as it always is, at least in our district it was, which meant the people at the bottom were forever going to be playing catch up until they were lucky enough, if they were lucky enough to get to those top steps in the salary guide. And nothing else was discussed. And one of the women with whom I work from our classroom raised her hand and she said, well, what about all these other things? We didn't talk about that. Did any of it come up? We didn't talk about that. We brought these issues to you. I typed them up myself. What did you do about that? He put his hand up and he said, we didn't talk about that. As if to say, shut up, sit down, this is what we did. And the meeting was over. And he proceeded to walk out of our school library. And the rumpus started. The people who had come to me with this material and said, give this to them, have them do something. I wasn't on the negotiating team, I was just a messenger. Got up and they started to call out, you need to come back here, we need to discuss this, all this kind of stuff. And on the way out the door, he refused to face them and he held his hand up like this. And my mentor George was sitting next to me and he goes, see that? That's what we have to say.
What was that?
George said, see that? That's what we have to fix.
Oh, fix.
And I had to then spend the rest of the year, which was a good 2.5 months, going back into the building every day, facing people who felt like they were paying their dues, they were speaking up, they were doing everything that they had been asked to do, and they were being summarily ignored. And not just ignored, but disrespected. You know, I've been teaching now, this is my 30th year in the classroom, when I had it all up. And this is the worst climate that I have ever seen for people in public education. I refuse to read certain newspapers or certain radio stations I can't listen to. It is an exercise in heartache to read the comments that are posted on newspaper websites and articles are posted about what's happening in Trenton, to see the comments that are being left there about teachers. My nephew is a police officer, newly minted. This will be his second year on the job, I guess, this summer. Who, in the line of duty, has already had to pull his gun once. He's a union member. I pray for him every day. My son graduated from college last year with a teaching certificate and a degree with honors. Can't get a job. His friends all think he's crazy for becoming a teacher, and they say so. He's had 24, 25-year-old acquaintances, not people that know him, will say, oh, yeah, summer's off, that kind of stuff, already. You know, I don't mean to be crying poor. I have a job, I'm lucky, I have job security. But I also watched 54 of my colleagues get laid off last week at our board meeting, and they passed a budget that said that we needed to close the wing of school and lay off 54 people. And I know some of those people. Our teaching team has been decimated by this. These are quality people. One of my colleagues is, going on 40. She has a daughter in junior high. She has a special needs, son who's severely autistic. Families depending on her health benefits. Plus her husband's private industry benefits don't measure up in terms of that kind of coverage. She lost her job. She's an excellent teacher. One of the most devoted young teachers I've ever met. And she's stunned. And she's angry. And she's cynical. And so that's kind of what I'm at this point.
I'd like to shift focus for a few minutes to Los Angeles. I had really no consciousness of unions or worker justice at all. It was only quite late in the process in my life that I finally sort of put pieces together and realized my grandfather was a train engineer, his son, my uncle was a train conductor, my father was a conductor. Obviously that's all unions. My father retired on a wonderful pension from working as a state worker in Pennsylvania, and as we went through his papers after he passed away, I discovered a card, AFL-CIO, for insurance salesmen. I've never heard of a union for insurance salesmen, but he was actually a member of 3 unions. I don't think I ever heard him say the word union in my life. But anyway, back in 1996, there were two very wonderful and dynamic women. Maria Elena Pedrasso, who's now head of the County Federation in LA, and Madeline Janice Aparicio, who had worked with the Central American community and was concerned about economic issues. The two of them got together and realized it was time to initiate a living wage campaign. And so they brought together people, and Madeline has a golden touch. She got some phenomenal funding from different foundations, and they pulled together a whole team of people to work on a community coalition to promote a living wage for those people who were working for companies that used to be, where the jobs used to be part of the city, but then were privatized. And what everybody could see very clearly was the way that the city was saving money was because the companies were paying the workers very low wages. There was a lot of turnover. The work wasn't being done very well. And it was time to try to raise the wages. And because there was that city council mechanism of adopting an ordinance, there was a chance that we might be able to do something. So they brought in some people who did actual research. What would happen if they looked at who were the companies that were getting the contracts from the city? Well, they were all multinational corporations. They were huge companies. They weren't small businesses. It was these outside folks getting it. They looked at what would happen if there was more money in the communities of where people lived who made low wages and were immigrants. And they found that, yes, money would recycle throughout the neighborhoods several times. And so they, as I said, they pulled together this wonderful coalition. They brought together academics, students, business people who believed in paying decent wages, people in the movie industry. And I was hired to organize the faith community. And that was actually a lot of fun and a wonderful experience. It's helpful to go back and to say some of those clergy came from congregations where they had food banks. They noticed that people coming to the food banks were employed full-time. Some of them had 2 jobs, some of them had 3 jobs, just to be able to make enough money to feed their family and put a roof over their heads. Some of the people, like Madeline, came from the community that had supported Salvadorans and Guatemalans and other people who come north and were stuck in really low-wage jobs. A lot of abuses, employers calling the immigration when it was payday so that they could avoid paying their workers and so on. And a lot of clergy were also involved in peace activities. And so there were sort of these informal networks, and we pulled them together into an organization called Clergy and Laity United for Economic Justice. And so crew members ended up doing a lot of different kinds of things to support this movement for a living wage. First and foremost, they would lobby members of the city council. We tried to arrange it for some of them to develop a pastoral relationship with the council people, so that when our lobbyists would come back from City Hall and say, Councilman number 1 is sort of wavering on this issue, I would then call the member of the clergy, and they would call the council person, and I would simply get a call back saying, don't worry, got it covered. I had no idea what that said. I just knew that that pastoral relationship was very important in the process of this campaign. Thanksgiving came around. We had people take paper plates and make designs on them. The kids loved it. Congregations and students, all kinds of people put glitter and drew turkeys and crayons. But the basic message was, unless you're making a living wage, you can't afford turkey at Thanksgiving. You know, there was one that had 2 hot dogs and said Happy Thanksgiving on their paper plate. So we of course delivered these to all the council members. And it was just a lot of fun, a lot of creativity. We rewrote some songs for Hanukkah and Christmas and went singing carols through City Hall. Anyway, it was just a continual reminder to the council that a living wage would really make a big difference in the city. Ultimately, the city council did agree with us, and they adopted a living wage package that at the time was very significant. We're workers over a period of time would get at least $2 an hour extra pay. They would get either health benefits or would get extra pay so that they could pay for their own health care. And it was the first time that some of them got holidays paid as well. So this was a tremendous impact on their lives. 5 years later, the umbrella group did a study and went back and tried to look and see what was the impact of the living wage ordinance. What they found was that people who used to have 2 and 3 jobs now had time to sit with their children and go over their homework. The students' grades shot way up. People were able to really engage much better with their children. The workers had time to be involved in their congregations and be involved in community efforts. And so it was really documented that this had made a tremendous difference in people's lives. The group that sponsored the living wage ordinance then also tried to work to develop a health care plan so that if these companies didn't have their own health care plan, that there would be a way for these low-wage workers to get some kind of a decent health care plan. So that was a long time ago. Since then, there has developed a network across the country through Interfaith Worker Justice, more than 50 chapters across the country, where there are people of faith who are working to support living wages, union representation, and now trying to protect worker rights. And they're also doing work now on what's been called wage theft. Many people, especially workers at the lower end, but even at the higher end of the scale, employers are unscrupulous at times, particularly in, say, restaurants. The people who work, the wait staff, never see the tips that are given. At Walmart, there have been lots of reports come out that Walmart would make people work through their breaks, work through their meal time, and they would have to punch out or keep working. And so there's a lot of different ways the employers have to steal the wages from their workers. And so there's now an effort to do ordinances at the state level around the country, and I think the first one has just been adopted. I can't remember if it's Florida or New York. I think they're both either looking at it or adopted it. So anyway, there's a lot of things that people in the faith community can do. What has been so important to me is that as I am engaged in this work, it's a real way to bridge gaps in a community. You have people from different ethnic, racial, religious backgrounds working together. You have people from low wages to higher wages, so you're breaching class distinctions. But it's a really wonderful way to come together and to meet people from your own community and to really try to address the economic issues of the day. Of course, we all know what's going on in Wisconsin and New Jersey and Ohio. And
What's going on in New Jersey? What's going on in New Jersey?
Well, let's make that the first question. I wanted to end, for those of you who aren't Quakers, there is a tradition of asking questions or queries. And so I'd like to end with a couple of queries just to think about how we use our own resources, even if you don't have time to be involved in a union or one of these efforts. Do we first go to local farmers and businesses, or do we turn to multinational corporations when we need to buy something? Do we leave a cash tip for wait staff instead of including the tip on a credit card so that owners of restaurants can't steal this money? Now, there's probably lots of wonderful restaurant owners. I'm not dissing them at all. Do we patronize companies responsible for outsourcing jobs from the U.S., deliberately pushing wages lower and lower, such as Walmart? Do we support unionized businesses? Do we know which companies even provide health benefits or sick leave for their workers? Do we avoid companies that refuse to pay their fair share of taxes to pay for the government infrastructure they need to operate and build their own operations? So these are different ways that we can all take part. Kitty has agreed to facilitate for us, and we should start with the first question and then move on.
So Bill Patterson, again, what's your question?
Oh, well, when Linda said we all know what's happening in Wisconsin and Ohio and New Jersey, I know about Wisconsin, I know about Ohio, but I don't know what is particular, other than the fact that I hear stuff from my wife, who is a recently retired state union worker, which is why I said I was from a union family. My parents and my ancestry had nothing to do with it. But I studied labor relations in graduate school, and so I have some appreciation of what's going on in the labor movement. But in particular, with what's going on in New Jersey, I'm hoping you can amplify that a little bit.
Well, what we have seen since the change in the state house, in terms of who's running the state, is a systematic and very deliberate multi-step campaign to reduce wages and benefits amongst state unionized workers. I don't usually engage in conspiracy theories, but it doesn't take too much to figure out that the largest state employee union in the state, NJDA, was made the first target of this because we, as a state association, did not endorse the current governor when he ran for election a year or so ago. We didn't endorse him because he refused to answer a questionnaire that was submitted to him, which is standard operating procedure. We even gave one to the Socialist Party candidate, and I think he answered the question. We didn't endorse him, in spite of which you might have heard. But we were sure during that campaign that Governor Christie would protect pensions and benefits. In fact, he didn't answer the questionnaire, but he did write us with the state association. I'm not speaking for NJDA here, by the way. I'm a card-carrying member, but I would never pretend to speak for them. That he would not touch our pension or our benefits. And then he proceeded to do exactly the opposite almost immediately after he came into office. He's since gone after the firefighters and the police. And, you know, we do deal in reality as union members. We live in the state. We pay taxes here. We support state institutions here. But we also know that, yes, the state's facing a massive budget crisis, as are many, if not most, of the states in the country. We understand this. But what I prefer to do when I deal with questions like that, as opposed to attacking people personally, like some people do when it comes to the governors, you know, he likes to do that to us, but I don't like, you know, counter-attacking a bully with bullying tactics. I don't think that's the way we really need to go. I think it's more appropriate to deal with facts. The fact is that the governor had an opportunity to reinstate a tax that most New Jerseyans supported last year on people that make over $1 million a year. He refused to do that, and as a result, we had an $800 million $800 million gap in education funding, which resulted in serious cuts to public education. And this wasn't just cutting teachers' benefits and salaries, so it wasn't just about us whining about our money, as it's been presented. You know, I know in our district we took a pay freeze for a year, for which our association was vilified by other workers. How dare we do this? How dare we give in? Well, we saved 24 jobs when we did that. We saved people's jobs, and we kept the programs that we have in our district. Our district's become a go-to district for special needs kids. We pride ourselves on the results that we get with kids that have autism, for example. We were opening, and we actually are going to have an Asperger's program next year for the first time. Asperger's specific program in our district that we've been working on for years. We're really proud of that. But those programs got, you know, basically stopped in their tracks to a large degree when we lost some of our funding. And we did what we had to do to save people's jobs. This year, again, this year we actually got a little bit of that money back. The governor's funding was increased slightly to many districts, mainly because of the heat that he took from so many suburban voters over what he did last year. But public sector employees now have become the big bad boogeyman for an agenda. I can't help but notice you have a copy of Rethinking Schools on your laptop. There's an article in that magazine this month. And yes, it's a pro-teacher magazine, and it's a very progressive magazine. But it basically tells you who it is that's responsible for this national campaign. It's an organized, national, well-funded campaign in all of these states, and notice it's particular states, it's not every state, to go after public sector employees and paint us out to be the people that are responsible for these debts and deficits and funding problems. And the fact is, we're not. We're not responsible for this. Every single paycheck, I have money taken out of my paycheck to pay into my pension. Every single check. It's the state of New Jersey, starting under Governor Whitman, that has not made a pension obligation. Did the state ever ask the state teachers union to come back to the negotiating table to renegotiate those deals? No.
That's because the legislature gets the state
So,
deal.
well, whatever the reason
I
is,
always remember that.
and I have not seen anything in the news, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that this governor, who's already a millionaire several times over in terms of his own personal wealth, not that I would ever engage in class warfare, mind you, but he's not taking care. He's not doing anything in terms, he'll finish his 8 years with a pension. And he'll be,
His wife makes $100 million.
so, well, you know,
She works on Wall
I
Street.
haven't, and I haven't heard anything about any refusal to take, the healthcare benefits that anybody in Trenton is entitled to. And the same thing goes for those people in Congress that are so concerned about socialized medicine, which, by the way, all of us are paying for. So, you know, this is about class warfare, as far as I'm concerned. And we're the first target. And as far as unions are concerned, I would encourage everybody to check out an HBO documentary we started running about 2 weeks ago about the Triangle Factory Fire, which CNN was nice enough to show for free last week. Which, if you check your schedule on your TV, you might be able to find them reshowing. And PBS did an American Experience documentary on the same stuff. Find out what life was like in America before there were unions. And think about those 148 young women that died in that fire because they had been refused the right to organize, to protect themselves against the abuses that went on in that factory.
So I think what we want to do is focus on what we can do as people of faith. Are there other questions?
I have another couple
Just a
things.
second, just a second.
Yeah, we had other hands, I'm sorry, I was sermonizing.
Kathy?
I'm so glad that you said all that you did, but just in case you don't know, okay, Governor Whitman took money
Oh, yeah.
from public employees' pension
Nobody ever
funds,
says that.
okay? And she
And
did
she
not
already
restore
had-
that money. So what is in our fund is our money. It's not our taxpayers' money, it's our money. And I just want to share something with you that's very visceral experience for me. When I retired from public school teaching, well, our family my husband's family has a family reunion. And the year I retired and went to that reunion, not one member of my husband's family said congratulations. Not one member. In fact, 2 people came up to me and said, you know, what are the rest of us supposed to do? Eat dog food? And quite frankly, these were 2 people who had cost my father-in-law a great deal of heartache through their financial mismanagement. I had received from one of my brothers-in-law a comment that I'm not even going to share with you. It took me a while to get over that. Okay, but I'm sharing it with you because what teachers are feeling, this demonization of our profession, is extremely visceral. And I agree, there is a conspiracy. And it's not just, it doesn't just involve us, I'm sorry, okay, because I'm very emotional. I think it does involve all workers who are unionized. I agree with you, I've thought about this for months. And I've tried in my heart and soul not to demonize the people who are doing this to us. You know, I taught for 38 years. I loved teaching. And I'm not going to say this in arrogance, okay, but I'm just saying it as a reinforcement. I was an award-winning teacher. Now, my friends and I are afraid we are teachers in some circles because we would be attacked. And right now, I don't have the ammunition, that kind of, which is a terrible word to say in this place, but I don't have what I need, okay? I don't have all the skills and tools and information that I would need, and the spirit to say it in such a way that I could make for peace. You know what I'm trying to say rather awkwardly? Turn the situation into something positive where we could find common ground. That's one of the biggest frustrations.
This relates directly to one of the things I wanted to say. I think if there is one area the unions today, the union leaders are remiss. It has traditionally been policy for public workers to take lower salary than others in exchange for job security, good pensions, good health care. It all comes out even, but they don't seem to have the whatever to make this a public statement. Yes, we have good health care. Yes, we have great pensions, but we have been giving up salaries and paying into this our whole careers. So it isn't the picture that the governors are painting. Nobody's out there contradicting these Republican
Well,
governors.
I would disagree with that, because I know that in Wisconsin, the union organizer did make a point of trying to say that. And I know that our
Well, it
state
didn't get across.
associations, well, and again, who gets the microphone? And I think in a
Well,
lot
that's
of
the second
cases,
thing. The second thing I wanted to
Yeah.
say is we waste 3 hours every night. Hate to say it, waste of time. Do anybody here watch Lawrence O'Donnell, Rachel Maddow, and Ed Schultz? Channel 40,
MSNBC.
MSNBC, and before that, I mean, they got a whole line of these commentators.
Rachel
Ed
provides
Schultz,
a free podcast, so you know.
Ed Schultz, the programming has recently been reshuffled, so if you haven't watched it for 6 months, it's a different lineup and different timing. Lawrence O'Donnell used to work for Senator for years and years, so he understands thoroughly what is supposed to be going on in Washington. And he recently called Rand Paul a liar because, well, this gets more complicated. But anyhow, Ed Schultz went to Wisconsin, and for a whole week, that's all his program was what was happening in Wisconsin. He's a big union guy. So there are people talking for you. I don't know who's listening. My family has not been union for a number of reasons. One, they weren't the kind of job that would require union. Sometimes they had no job, and it hasn't been a union thing with us. But,
If I can just add, thank you, Jen, for bringing that up. Let me make this a commercial. We've got a number of materials over here, knowing that this week issues of unions and workers would be a hot topic. We've copied up a number of different resources, and one of them starts off with a piece from Philadelphia Yearly Meetings, Faith and Practice, that talks about a responsibility to be engaged in issues of economic ill. And in that same packet, there's a piece from the Economic Policy Institute in Washington, where they did an analysis of public workers' wages. And so that kind of information is out there. But I think the question is, when we're watching mainstream media, who controls what things actually get out? And so, yes, you can watch MSNBC, but a lot of other stations, they're not there to really promote a worker rights story. My union, American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, is trying to get the word out, and they're doing a lot of press releases and activities and other kinds of things. So you can go to their website, and they've got some materials there.
There's a question here, I think.
Yes, a question. As you said, pose things as questions. Well, what is the reason that the other opposition side has gotten your republic?
brothers.
I was in advertising for years. My wife's a teacher. I was in advertising for years, and the way you got your message out was to state it over and over and over. And if I might take a section of what you said, you said, well, I don't want to be the one to get my hands dirty. You know, let him make the bad statements. I'll work in the background. We've worked in the background so long that we no longer exist. We're part of that wall because we won't raise our voice against it.
Well, I wasn't saying don't raise your voices. I was just saying don't do the name calling and sorts of thing.
But that's how they get it. Negative advertising has proven over and over again in research that negative advertising is what gets people interested.
Not only that, but lots of lies.
And what's more, yeah, well, you don't have to use the law.
Here's another question here.
Yeah, would you say then part of the problem is the tremendous influence of stations like Fox TV, you know, which is really influencing the mindset of the public? We have that on the one hand, and also the fact that we are in an economic recession and people are not going to think logically, they're going to react against what they perceive as people who have it better than they do.
And that's the first thing that you brought up against. And this is one of the things, that when we talk about answering the questions, when people say, you have a pension, you have this, you have that, I ask them, why don't you? Why don't you have it? Why don't you have it?
Here's a question here.
I was a U.S. Steelworkers Union for a year, and my wife, as a teacher, was a union member for many, many years. Yeah, right. That was a pretty lousy union back when I was in 49, 50, in many different ways, but at least it's a union. But we're preaching to the choir. I mean, this is really a nationally organized kind of an opposition we're facing. The American Legislative Council writes the laws that circulate it to the governors and then they push it. The American people is for, 60% or more are for collective bargaining. So the majority of people, I think, want redress and don't hate teachers. It's the minority that does. But how can we take it to another level to get this moving along? We're preaching to the choir.
Sure, thank you. I think John had a question here.
Quakers have typically not been too involved in politics. And I just wanted to remind everybody that my understanding is that every single member of the New Jersey legislature is up for re-election this year. And, you know, it could be this time next year, all new people. And if it's the people who make our laws who are our bulwark against a rogue governor. And I think, you know, one of the things I'm looking at now, I went past the New Jersey Democratic Committee headquarters the other day, and I got to start going in there and doing my part to try and change the political climate in New Jersey to work for the people.
I saw.
We have to go. I just want to say something.
Okay.
The Democrats put forth the bill in the legislature recently to deregulate television, the telephone system in the state, which is terrible. The Democrats introduced that. So we're not just bucking. This is a big thing. Get our heads around. I mean, we're fighting city.
Thank you. Greg, I see back there. You've had a question for a while.
Dave, you had mentioned something about the tax on those who earn over $1 million. Do you have any idea how much, if that were re-implemented, how much revenue that would produce and how much of that would make in the shortfall of the budget?
Well, I mean, the information that we were getting from our association indicated that it would have more than made up for the $800 million shortfall that caused the funding cuts from last year. And, you know, and then the argument comes back, well, then the millionaires will leave the state. Well, no, they won't. First of all,
Henry Rowan left the state. Only lives in Bucks County.
to go to Pennsylvania, which is
Which pays
going to
3
be
or
the
4%
same
tax
source of
versus-
profit.
Let Dave finish.
You know,
And if you won the lottery, you'd be out of the state too.
no. Well, first of all, I don't play lottery, so
Okay.
I wouldn't be, I wouldn't be,
Let's get back on subject
my
here.
job is here, my life is here, so I'm not quite, you know, ready to argue that point. When you look at, we mentioned the economic situation that's going on in the country right now. You've got government accounting office statistics that show that CEO salaries are up 27%, worker salaries on average have somewhere in the last 10 years gone up overall something like 2%. So we're talking about huge wage disparities, huge income disparities, not just in New Jersey, but across the country. I don't believe that the country's broke. I believe that the money's out there. I just believe that at some point we have to do something about making things equal, making things a little more fair, and getting our priorities in order.
I think Veronica had a question, and I see one here. We need to wrap up soon, but go ahead.
I'm a public librarian, and we're probably just as bad off, if not worse, than teachers. Librarians and general, we're kind of the first to go when things are being cut. And I work in that law library. I'll be lucky to have a job next year because the town, based on the philosophy and consistency, feels that the library, which is independent, should be part of the county system, which they can't prove would save any money at all. But just because the idea that consolidating and cutting services is somehow going to be good for the town. And my question is, and I live in Marlton, why do people vote against themselves? Why did they vote not to have the budget in their town, which is going to lay off teachers, and they're going to have to pay for services in the schools they didn't have to pay for before, which is going to outweigh the minimal amount of increase in their taxes that the budget would increase it by? It's just mind-boggling to me that the people don't even vote for themselves. They'd rather pay for all their children's sports, or in some towns pay for full, child care when they won't have full day kindergarten, rather than paying like $20 more a year in taxes. It's just, I think that the message has to get across that you're hurting yourself.
Did you have something, Indeed? Oh, I see.
Considering that we have already spent over $1 trillion in the current war that we've unofficially gotten into in Libya, just with the missiles and all those ships and personnel and trauma. I mean, regardless how you feel about it. And of course, that's not counting Afghanistan and Iraq. And you look at the budget of the military as compared to, you look at our roads. Our roads are crumbling. Our infrastructure is, the bridges are gone. They blew up a bridge going to Canada because they couldn't keep it up. If you look at that and the proportion of money that is going towards the military complex, now one of the big Republicans, Eisenhower, said, beware of the military complex. And what do we have?
Military industrial complex.
Yes. I mean, here we are having, what is more important than the people of your own country? Well, the people of Libya, what do they have? Well, they have oil.
Oh my goodness.
So, I mean, there's the answer. The answer is that we have plenty of money, but it's going somewhere else. And who can win from that? Not us.
Anyway, I have a solution to all our problems. This is going to be done by Candy. I was driving behind a car in Pennsylvania, a nice car, and it had a bumper sticker, a picture of Barack Obama, and it said, "Say no to socialism." And the worst thing about the car was it was going 55 miles an hour. And okay, so we need a bumper sticker that we can all put on our cars that says, "Say yes to infrastructure," somehow or another.
Just a thought for all of you. Tomorrow is the anniversary of the 1968 death of Dr. Martin Luther King when he was struggling for the sanitation workers There's going to be, all over the country, there's going to be some gatherings. There's one in Camden from 5 to 7 at Whitman Poetry Center. There's going to have a lot of speakers in Philadelphia at 8 o'clock. I don't have the address, but it's on the We Are One website. We Are One. And there's any place you want to go.